Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is DK Bhattacharya. I'll be talking about function of tool types. In the onset of it, I must tell you that this is a very dicey term, function of tool types, because function of tool type is not written on the tools, and we have committed before we went for analytical types that our analytical type will be entirely based on techno and morphology. Function is an interpretative factor. So empirically, no tool is used for function for us in our analytical methodology. The classic example is this, that if you have a cycle, you have a bicycle, you have a motorcycle, you have a car, you have a railway engine, all have the same function, but they don't have the same structure. So function remains for us an interpretative level. If it is interpretative, then each of the level of lower Paleolithic, middle Paleolithic, upper Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, and even Chalcolithic tool types will have interpretative range of functions. And this range of functions are tried by many authors to be made as empirical range of functions by trying to exercise and trying to do functions themselves, like cutting raw meat, cutting hardwood, and so on, to show that possibly this was used for this kind of function. But this is all analogy. You try to do a function and try to project it as the possible function of the tools of that period. But the point remains that function of tool types is basically possibilistic and not empirical. But some scholars tried to reduce it to empirical level also, and they started doing what is known as micro-edgeware analysis. When micro-edgeware analysis was done, then many of the tools could be interpreted as having been used for cutting function, cutting soft flesh, cutting hardwood, or doing saw-like function, and so on. But it doesn't make any sense to us. Basically, all lower Paleolithic, which is from 1.8 or say 2.2 million to almost 100,000 years, is a huge period of time with almost as many as 35 tool types. And all these tool types and all this period, the tools are multifunctional. Even then, if you narrow down on imperative, on a comparative level, then you can say, if there is a pointed button in a hand axe, repeat, if there is a pointed button in a hand axe, a button by necessity is not the end which is functional. It is the end which is opposite the functional edge. Why then man has gone for so liberally taking out or making a pointed button? And possibly therefore it can be said that the button was hafted, and hafted in some kind of a handle. Now this kind of interpretation can be done for lower Paleolithic tools. But let us proceed by the assumption that almost all lower Paleolithic tools, except possibly the flake tool types, almost all lower Paleolithic tools are multi-purpose tools. They must have been used for hacking function, cutting function, scraping functions, and we cannot prove or disprove any one of them. The problem arises when you have very small, beautifully made tools which are of lower Paleolithic period, but they are diminutive in shape, and you really don't know if they could have been doing any kind of hacking blow or hacking functions where the larger variety has been doing. So you have possibilities of trying to interpret functions only when you try to enter Middle Paleolithic onward. Middle Paleolithic shows a plethora of flake tool types, and one of the most important flake tool type is a point. Now this is a point, and especially a special technique is developed, and that is called Levallois point technique. Here a core is taken and two oblique blows are given so that in a V-like shape, so that a ridge is produced. And the ridge is produced in such a manner that if you give a blow, a pointed flake comes out. And the pointed part is the ridge part. And until the ridge is exhausted, every blow brings out a pointed flake. Now this is a classic example of the overemphasis of the requirement of a point. And there can be no other function of a point other than that of a similar point in a Chalcolithic period or in a modern day period. So point is a point. But the moment you have a point with proximal end, two shoulders done, you immediately say, it's an arrowhead, or it's a lancet, because the shoulders in the proximal end immediately shows that they must have been hafted at the anterior end of some kind of a handle. So Middle Paleolithic onward, the range of functions to the tool types you can narrow down. A point cannot be for cutting. A point is definitely piercing tool type. And possibly this piercing, cutting, and this kind of load of function was given by Professor Binford when he analyzed the material from Laugerie-Haute or Combé-Grenal. The material from Combé-Grenal was used by Professor Louis Binford in functional load to the tool types, and therefore he could isolate some of the characters or some of the varieties of tools as cutting or curing tools, some hunting implements. Say 5 tool types were indicated as hunting implements. Now this is a desperate attempt in us to try to reconstruct the past. How do I reconstruct the past? Now, if you have an assemblage of tool types where most of them are hunting implements, you can jolly well say, sir, this is a hunting site. If you have a kind of cluster or assemblage of tools where most of them are curing, C-U-R-I-N-G, curing types, then you can say, this is domestic activity area. So the desperate need of reconstructing the cultural behavior of the past has been done by way of trying to narrow down the function or functional range of the tool types. But then the moment you start seeing the Middle Paleolithic tools, it starts making some kind of a hazy picture. Yeah, they were using these tools for specific functions, and these functions were cutting, slicing, scraping, and of course piercing. And the piercing is the kind which is definitely of the shouldered or unshouldered points, especially the level of point. You come to upper Paleolithic. Now suddenly functions can't change. The requirement of a Paleolithic group, the functions can't change unless your activity is changing. And one of the needs of the activity change that you can see is seen in increased working of leather work. The leather was important for them to cover themselves or to make some kind of domestic dwelling by hut, covering the hut with leather, and leather requires some kind of piercing tools. So from Middle Paleolithic onward, you find functionally large amount of borers or pursuers are found. So you can't say, sir, borer is used in multiple functions. They are more or less job specific. What I'm trying to say is lower Paleolithic tools type are multifunctional. What I'm trying to say is that Middle Paleolithic tool types are job specific. They are either for scraping or cutting, or they are for piercing, or they are for boring. So you have a range of functions which are narrowed down when you come to 160,000 onwards till 10,000 BCE. So 160,000 to 10,000 BCE, you have Middle Paleolithic and Upper Paleolithic. You come to Upper Paleolithic, it seems your activity areas are changed. You have large amount of activities of scraping wood, scraping bones, engraving bones or antler in order to make harpoons, and sometimes even as Solutrean period has, the bird bones are taken and a hole is made in the posterior end, and they are called eyed needles. They are excellent example of a needle of today which is in steel, the same kind, and it is in a bird bone coming from 16,000 BCE. So you find the function are very specific when you come to Upper Paleolithic, and the range of function is now increased into such functions which are not necessary in Middle Paleolithic period. For instance, the function of burin was not so important in Middle Paleolithic, though there are burins. But Upper Paleolithic, burins become very important tool type, and I am sure its function is very, very evident that you have an increased amount of antler, ivory and bone tools, and they can be worked only with burins, either for engraving decorations or taking out a barb from a solid axis, and so on and so forth. So you start getting more job specific activity of an area which was earlier not introduced or utilized in Middle Paleolithic period. But you come to Mesolithic. Now that's a very interesting period. All the tool types and their functions are no longer required. You require an entirely different plethora of functions of these tool types because they are no longer used as tool per se. They are used in combination by hefting on a wooden handle. So when they are hefted, the kind of functions that they will require are quite different, like bow and arrow, for instance. The Upper Paleolithic didn't have the requirement of bow and arrow, but you come to Mesolithic, you have the primary requirement of bow and arrow. I say primary because you gave up the weight of the tools and made those tiny stupid looking tools only because you wanted them to fly. You wanted them to fly, that is why you made microliths. So the primary thing that you have in Mesolithic period is flying objects which are used in combination. And the moment they are used in combination, the function can be as varied as the number of ways in which they are combined. You can combine them in two pieces in the anterior end of a wood and it becomes an arrow. You combine couple of them, it becomes a harpoon. So combined, how you are combining them, in which manner you are combining them, creates the function of the tool. And the function of the tool is just evident. It's quite evident and need not be speculative. I repeat again to go back. Lower Paleolithic, it was more or less speculative and it was multifunctional. You come to Middle Paleolithic, they are job specific and they have very beautiful example of points having been evolved with a specific technique called level of point technique. So you know the overemphasis of point having been used. You come to Mesolithic, you come to Upper Paleolithic, you find their involvement in function is on the antler and ivory and bones and creating large amount of these borers and burins. So borers and burins, borers start increasing right from Middle Paleolithic. So they're very job specific. You can't say borer is used to cut flesh. It is to make a hole. So you find the job specificity becomes more or less explicable from the term of range of tool types as you go to Middle Paleolithic and Upper Paleolithic. And not only you know the specificity of functions, but you also know how many new functions are added. These functions were not required in the preceding period. The working of a harpoon, for instance, on ivory. It was not required earlier. It is becoming a specific duty or a specific function of the Magdalenian period. So you find a large range of new functions coming into play in Upper Paleolithic. In Mesolithic period, another group of new functions come, and two of the new functions that we say are completely new are the creation of hand-driven harpoons or the creation of an arrow or bow and arrow, if I can put it that way. So the point is the range of functions are becoming more and more evident and narrowed down as you come from Lower Paleolithic to the Mesolithic period. Let us come to the Neolithic period. How many kinds of functions can you have of an axe? An axe is an axe is an axe. Now, axe can be at the most used to till a soil if you want and you don't have anything else in your hand. But otherwise, the whole labor that you put in, the kind of grooves that you have found that we know for hours together, they have been ground to create that polished and ground working edge. They must have been used for cutting trees. Now, the trees that has been cut is very well evident from the kind of grinding and polishing that was done by these axes. Otherwise, why so many axes were created by Neolithic people? There was a new function required which was not required in the earlier periods. And this new function is to chop off smaller trees. I don't know how big trees could be chopped off with this kind of axes, but certainly they were hafted, and the point that they were hafted and the point that they were used for the first time to create farming economy is so important that it is taken as a symbol in papal headquarters in Vatican. In Vatican, the logo of papal headquarters shows a Neolithic axe holding in the hand. So Neolithic axe is taken as the first step towards civilization, a first step towards sedentary life with a village economy, and that goes on to become complex society. So axe become a very important implement for which is tied to farming. But you can't say the function is plow or the function is to cut tree on the basis of what you see. You try to imply it on the basis of the fact that for the first time you find domesticated seed by mitochondrial, by molecular analysis of the burnt seeds, and then from the DNA you say that this is domesticated seed. You know how domesticated seed will have chromosomal changes. The chromosomal change will happen because domestication means that all the seeds are of the same kind. So it is called homogeneous plantation. So if you have wheat here, you have a wheat here, you have a wheat here, you have a wheat there. All the wheats are the same, so they would have competition. But wild wheat will have a wheat here and something else there. So this wheat, wild wheat, will have a competition. So the chromosomal structure of this wheat will be different. So you can easily find out in the paleobotany lab whether the seed that you have collected from your excavation is domesticated seed or not. And once you know a domesticated seed, you know it was done by farming of a homogeneous plot. And you can't have a homogeneous plot in a a virgin forest where all the trees are with their canopy linked to each other unless you cut the trees. So by implication you say, well, why was an axe necessary with farming? The axe was necessary with farming possibly because it was to cut trees. Many people in the beginning say, no, they were used as plow heads. They were used to plow. This is not true, because plow agriculture happens at least 3000 years later. Plow agriculture happens only when the farming economy is much intensified. It is initial stage when the Celts come, 6000 BC, 5000 BC, Koldiva 5400 BC, Lahurudeva 600 BC, and you are getting Celts. Now these Celts cannot be for intensive farming. These Celts certainly was cut bushes. I don't know if they cut big trees, but they certainly cut bushes to clear a land plot for homogeneous planting. So in an implied way, you can say these Celts are for farming economy, for cutting trees or clearing a plot for farming. You have, however, another type which is called a shoelast Celt. A shoelast Celt is an adze which is not biconvex, which is convex from the dorsal side, and the ventral side is flat. And the flat side is a little extended also. And this is called shoelast Celt on the assumption that this was added as a shoe to the plow. You know, the shoe to the plow means the part which is the pointed part of the plow that does the furrowing job. So it was believed that the shoelast Celt is a direct proof of the fact that these celts were added in a curved handle in the form of either a hoe or a plow. I wouldn't know whether they were really used for a plow or not, but the fact remains that functional range for these axes and adze vary from the fact they were used to clear a forest or they were used to clear the farming land by way of cutting shrubs and bushes. Of course, fire could have been used. Fire could have been used to clear the forest to a large extent, but they are also used to cut the trees. The fact remains that you have small little Celts coming from eastern India, northeast India, and they are having shoulder base. Now obviously these Celts could not have been used to cut big trees. So you can't link them either as plow share or plow shoe or as a Celt which was used to cut trees. They seem to be small little pieces which were attached in the form of a hoe to clear the topsoil for jhum cultivation, for burning forest slopes and then creating multiple crop and so on. So function of the tools are also not universal. You have a Celt in northeast India which is not for cutting forests, couldn't have been because they are so small. Similarly, the ring stones that we find in North India or Middle Ganga Valley are very big. The Navdatuli ring stones are as much as 2 kilo in weight. And these ring stones can fit the interpretation of function that they were used as mace head. Mace head means today in Haryana, when you have to separate the chaff from the crop, then you cut your harvest and spread it out and make a bulwark on it, and you make the bulwark for a long time, then the chaff is separated, the grains are separated. Now it is believed that in some places you can take this ring stone, put a shaft in it and do the pounding on the floor so that the seed can be separated. So they was given the name mace head. So functionally it was almost decided that all ring stones are mace heads. But the moment you go to northeast India, the point becomes very enigmatic. It becomes enigmatic because when you see the ring stones of North India or northeast India, you find them as small as rings, as small as this. They couldn't have been used for pounding crop. They are definitely as small as to be used possibly as net sinkers for a fishing economy. This is very interesting that you are dealing with a part where its rainfall is so high that there are bogs, lakes and rivers, and your main economy is not of harvesting. In other words, we see that function of the tools are not merely to interpret the way they were handled, but they can be interpreted to the way a kind of adaptation to ecosystem was undertaken. For instance, the Northeast India that I was talking about is so high in rainfall. There are so many bogs and lakes created, and they're so full of fishes that you don't require all those big ring stones. You require small ring stones as sinkers in a small little net. So the main economy therefore seems to be fishing here, as contrast to the farming that was there in Middle Ganga Valley. So you keep seeing that the function of the tools can be also extended to the adaptational strategy of a given economy, which has seldom been done, which is wrong. It should be done, and then you can understand the varieties of adaptational strategies used. There is another point. For many parts of Northeast India, from where thousands of cells have been found, Darjeeling has thousands of cells that have been found. And these cells have been picked up by people with all kinds of superstitions in the past. Some people in North Bengal use them as kind of a religious object and worship it. They call it Dharma Atma. And Dharma Atma is a word they use for early Buddhistic period. So apparently they link it with Buddhism, I don't know how. And you find some parts of Jharkhand, Bihar and also Assam where these are used and they are kept secret for medicinal purposes. These rocks are celts and ring stones or whatever. They are rubbed against granitic base and a paste is made, and that is used for medicinal purposes. I don't know whether they are real function of those tools or not, but archaeologically relevant function refers to strategy of adaptation. And a strategy of adaptation of a ring stone is so classic for Northeast. The small little ring stones definitely must have been used for net sinking, and fishing must have been the predominant economy in this area. Now this is the kind of interpretation that function can lead you to. I have talked about the level of points. I said, why go for level of point technique unless you require large number of points in a succession? That means overemphasis of points. And the moment you say there is an overemphasis of points, you immediately can project it to a function where you have spearheads, a large number of spearheads being used for combating at a 3 to 4 feet distance hunting. We know that this kind of hunting was not done directly. We know traps were made. There were holes in the ground where branches of trees were spread out, and animal used to be trapped and then they used to be killed. No ferocious quadruped can be killed by this tiny level of points. So you know that these functional interpretation of tool types can go a long way to understand the strategy of adaptation to ecosystem, which has not been adequately done in India. However, we shift to areas in southern India, for instance. And when you come to southern India, especially the part which is the rain shadow area from Nagpur down to Sangankallu, and there you find large number of cells, and these cells are definitely used not to furrow a ground, not to use as a plow. Plow agriculture cannot happen in India till about 2000 BC. Plow agriculture refers to intensive agriculture. We do not have a village which extends even more than say 30-40 feet area. You have cluster of huts. You don't have a proper village developing in India, especially in South India. And there you find large number of these celts and mostly axes. You know these axes were used to clear a ground and create 2 or 3 sturdy, very sturdy, drought-resistant crops like ragi and hulgi. So you have adaptational strategy of a given community reflected in the function of the tool types. So tool types and their function need not be reduced to mere acceptance of the function as may be, but as functions which refers to the ecosystem adaptation. This is a very important component which we have not paid adequate attention to while analyzing the function of the tool types. Basically, when we do analysis of the tool types, we are talking of structure and technology, technomorpho analysis. They are analytical types. They are not cognitive types, and yet we have given them cognitive names. The cognitive names are axe, burin, borer. Now these are all referring to a function, and these functions have been interpretative. They are not empirical reality. They are interpreted by us as possibilistic. But we can't leave it there. Just talk a possibilistic function and full stop. No. This possibilistic function also gives you a large amount of scope to go beyond in trying to evaluate the strategy of adaptation. What kind of strategy of adaptation requires what kind of population density? large population means intensive agriculture. If we find in intensive agriculture a Shula silt, you can say it is plough economy. But then we don't find Shula silt in intensive agriculture. If at all, you find it Chalcolithic period. Now let us look at Navdatoli. Navdatoli is a Neo-Chalco site in Prakashan district near Narmada in Madhya Pradesh. And the amount of microliths that you find in a Chalcolithic period immediately makes it suspicious. In other words, you try to see that you have a choice. Either go for intensive agriculture and thereby make a village-like society, or you don't go for intensive agriculture, you continue for 60% of your economy as hunting and gathering. And any lean period between two crops, when there is nothing, the land is dried up, you go for hunting economy. You go for gathering economy. So the choice to make hunting gathering as a kind of a second choice immediately takes you out from the intensive agricultural period, and you can call them as Neo-Chalco sites of South India. The Navdatoli site where you have large number of microliths continue. Otherwise, why microliths should continue in the Chalcolithic period? You have sites like Balathal, you have sites like Ahar, where you find hundreds of microliths. In fact, they become better microliths than the Mesolithic period. So I am referring to these Chalcolithic functions of tool types. I am referring to functions of tool types of every period to be used in order to understand the scale of adaptational strategy that a community seeks in order to identify the ecosystem within which he wants to survive and he wants to stabilize himself. And you have varieties of such varieties of adaptation, at least 3 varieties identifiable in India, as I have said: East India, South India, and of course Middle Ganga Valley. Thank you.